Hi there and welcome to another crop gear review. Today we'll be having a quick look at the LanParte V-Lock battery system, comprised of the V-Lock battery plates and a V-Lock battery, of course. Hi guys and welcome to another gear review. Today we'll be having a quick look at the LanParte V-Lock battery plate and the LanParte V-Lock battery itself. But first we'll have to answer the question, why would you want to use a V-Lock battery system? A V-Lock battery system basically means that you put on one giant brick, which is a giant battery, on a battery plate in this case. And from there on out the power is distributed to all kinds of devices, including your camera, your electronic viewfinder, your external recorder, etc, etc. This means that you only have to deal with one kind of battery, and this is a very big battery, which means that your equipment will be able to run quite long on one battery. If however the battery runs out, you just simply replace one battery instead of monitoring all kinds of battery levels and all kinds of separate pieces of equipment that you may or may not have on your rig. So this really makes it a lot easier and makes it impossible for just one piece of equipment to silently run out of juice. It's very handy to have. It is however quite expensive, but once you have it, you're pretty much good to go. So let's have a quick look at the LanParte battery plate first. A battery plate is basically the spot where you lock in your battery, and which then in turn supplies all your equipment with power. So what do you want to see in a battery plate? You want to see all the ports that you need for your equipment on there. So if you're, for example, trying to power 5 different devices, you need at least 5 ports that supply those pieces of equipment with power, and those ports need to be the correct ports for your equipment. So you'll have to first have a look at what kind of equipment am I trying to power, and what kind of ports do they need, and what kind of voltages, etc. The LanParte battery plate has quite a lot of ports, which is a good thing in this case. On the left side there's of course the charging port, so the battery plate also functions as a V-Lock battery charger, which is really handy to have if you do not have a separate charger, and where separate chargers are kind of expensive. So that's a good thing to have on a cheaper battery plate. So on the left side there's also a 15 volt AC out port, 5 volt out port and a 12 volt out port. If you switch it over to the other side, there's a USB port which powers 5 volts, which can be handy for powering your cell phone or whatever, but I actually use it to power my Zoom H4N audio recorder, which is powered through the USB port then. Another 12 volt port and an 8.4 volt port for cameras, and specifically DSLR cameras. The good thing about this little port is that it's a lot smaller than the other ports, so you cannot accidentally stick your camera charger in the wrong port, which if you, for example, put your camera charger in a 12 volt port, it may burn out or whatever. So they made this port a lot smaller, which is good for the safety of your camera. So as you may notice on this side there are some special things. There's one switch which is called the Hdmi Switch. It has an on and off setting, and what that does is power on the HDMI splitter. So this battery plate actually has an HDMI splitter integrated into the plate itself. On the right side there's the input port. You put your HDMI cable into that, and on the back side of the plate you suddenly have 2 HDMI out ports, which is really handy if you are using a lot of equipment which use HDMI. For example, when you want to use an electronic viewfinder and an external recorder at the same time, while your camera only supports HDMI out, which is, I guess, mainly focused on DSLR cameras, because most DSLRs feature one HDMI out port, and that's basically it. But if you're having trouble with that, then that's a great feature to have. My camera is a Blackmagic Cinema camera, which only features SDI out, so I'm not able to use it unless I put some converter in between. But yeah, I haven't had the need to use it yet. But as I said, if you ever need it, it's there, which is a good thing to have. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about yet is on the left side there's a D-tap port, which is basically an industry standard for all kinds of high-end equipment, and I use that one the most, but I'll talk about that a little later. In order to power your camera, as I said, you need a smaller pin. You get one, of course, with the package. You get a lot of different cables, etc. But one for the camera, which ends in, well, a plug. But the plug itself isn't really good for anything. So what you then have to do is plug in this dummy battery. This dummy battery, for example, is the same size as a Canon Rebel T3i battery. So you put in this dummy battery into the battery slot of the camera, the cable runs out through the camera, and then it's powered through the V-Lock battery system. And you can buy a lot of different dummy batteries for all kinds of cameras, of course all the Canon cameras, but a lot of Nikon cameras as well. And I'm guessing that when there are new cameras coming out, there's bound to be one or two manufacturers that pick up the dummy battery for that, and you'll be able to order the dummy battery for your specific camera and just plug it in, and you're good to go. So that's a really versatile thing to in order to power DSLR cameras. As I said earlier, I'm using the Blackmagic cinema camera, and powering that one is a bit awkward, because there aren't a lot of, at least when I checked, there weren't a lot of cables out there to plug into the BMCC to a battery plate. But I found this one, which goes into the Blackmagic camera and is powered through a D-tap. So as I said before, D-tap is a standard size for high-end electronic equipment in this industry. Just plug it in to the side of the battery plate and you're good to go. You can while this is plugged in, of course, you can power any other device that you want. The only downside to this plate itself is that there's only one D-tap port. So if you are a user that relies heavily on D-tap ports, you may want to look into another plate which only features D-tap ports, for example, because there are battery plates out there that only feature multiple D-tap ports. But other than that, it's a great battery plate. As you can see, it also comes with a 15mm rod system, so you can easily slide it onto your rig and lock it in, and then that's it. So that's the LanParte battery plate. Good piece of equipment, sturdy but not too heavy. A lot of different ports, HDMI-Splitter, and integrated rail support. So that's good. Onto the LanParte brick itself. It's the LanParte V-mount battery. It's a 150 watts version, and it's a big block of juice. It's basically all made of plastic except for the V-lock itself, which is metal, for it to be very sturdy. And of course the connectors on the front of the battery are not plastic either. So one side is basically nothing, the top side is nothing. There's only one point of interest, and that's the right side of the battery. You have a little screen which indicates how full your battery is, how much time is remaining through the battery, and what kind of voltage it's producing at this moment. There's also a button to illuminate this screen. And the good thing about this screen is when it's powering, it will tell you how long it's going to take to be fully charged. And when you are powering stuff from the battery, it tells you how long you have left on one battery charge. And the special thing about that is it depends on how much power is being drawn from the battery. So the more equipment you put on, the less time it indicates. What I'm trying to say is that it's not just a percentage, like how full is this battery. It actually calculates the remaining amount of time you have, calculates it from the amount of power that you are drawing at the moment. The third special thing about this battery is, as you can see here, it features a D-tap port on the battery itself. So that means if you combine the LanParte battery plate with the LanParte battery, you have one D-tap port on the battery plate and one D-tap port on the battery itself. that's a good thing, because I have to use 2 D-tap ports in my current setup, and if it didn't feature the D-tap port on the battery, then I would have a problem. The other good thing is that you can charge the battery through D-tap. At least that's what I've heard. I've never tried it because I do not have a D-tap charger, but I heard that you can charge the battery through the D-tap port, which may come in handy if you are using the V-Lock plates with another battery while you're shooting and you want to charge a second battery at the same time, but do not have the money for an expensive V-Lock battery charger, because they are kind of expensive, and compared to them a single D-tap charger is a lot cheaper. So that may be an option if you want to cheap out on charges. So all in all, it's a really good system. With my Blackmagic camera and an electronic viewfinder and a Zoom H4N attached to it, I can go about 6 hours of shooting, not continuously, but pretty much 6 hours, which is a lot. So if I have a full day of shooting, like 8 or 10 hours, I may need a second battery. I do have 2 just to be sure. The good thing about V-Lock batteries is you can stick them on all kinds of equipment in the higher segment of video production. So a lot of LED lights, etc. do feature a V-Lock battery system. So you can just click in one of these batteries and you can power your lights, for example. So the downsides, it's heavy. It's heavy and it's expensive. That's basically it. You do have to make sure that you know what kind of equipment you want to charge, because as I said, it has lots of ports, but most of these ports I do not use because my equipment asks for D-tap ports, or in the case of the Zoom H4N, the USB port. I'm sure that I will be able to charge my electronic viewfinder and my Zoom H4N through one of the 12 volt, 5 volts or whatever ports, but then you need a specific cable for that, and cables are sometimes hard to come by. If however you know how to solder, then you may be able to solder some parts together to create the perfect charger for your equipment. But I just get my chargers from eBay and then I have to take whatever I can get. So D-tap and USB ports it is for me. So again, great battery plate, integrated system for rails, lots and lots of ports, D-tap ports, HDMI splitter, separate port for charging cameras, and it's a charger. The battery, solid piece of battery, features a good solid V-Lock, has a great little screen that tells you time remaining, and features another D-tap. I have to warn you though, I used these things in slight drizzle once and the batteries really didn't like that. So they burned out and that was that for the batteries. So do not get these things wet, ever. I always put a plastic bag around the battery stuff. So that's it for the LanParte V-Lock battery system. I hope this video was useful to you and I will see you next time. So happy shooting out there. Bye!